Welcome to the Tip Wealth Builders podcast, where we bring you insights, strategies, and stories to help you compound your wealth and knowledge. I'm Kerry Fleming, your host for this exciting series. So whether you're a seasoned investor or just starting your wealth building journey, this podcast is designed to inspire, educate, and empower you. Welcome back to Tip Wealth Builders. In this session, we're tackling one of the most powerful concepts in wealth creation, compounding. It's not just a financial principle, it's a philosophy that can transform how you think about investing. Today, we'll break it down with live examples and calculations to show you just how impactful compounding can be. Joining me today is Head of Funds Management and Education, Sanjee Narendran. So today we're going to talk about a word that we often hear thrown around, and that's compounding. So it's something that if you've ever been for a loan or anything like that, you will have heard the term, but it's something that we really don't get the power of compounding and how to utilize it. And with me today, I've got Sanjee, who's just going to tell us, what is it? What is this magical power that we talk about called compounding?
Yeah, well, compounding is often described as the eighth wonder of the world. Buffett loves it. He talks about it all the time. And really, that's the secret to billionaires' success. Families' generational wealth has been built up through compounding. And we learn about it. We learn about it when we calculate our interest rates and mortgage rates, and we talk about it a bit. But that's money you're generally going the other way and compounding against us and going towards the banks. This is how they build their wealth. But in terms of us and how we can make compounding work for us, it is so powerful that it's hard to kind of believe.
Yeah.
We as humans also don't generally think in terms of compounding. Our brains don't calculate it so easily. But access to technology, we have things on our phones, we have it on our laptops and computers and so on, that you can just jump onto a compound interest website and run a few scenarios, run a few numbers and see what that difference makes when you make a few variations and a few changes. And I think that's a great practical example to run through today. And there's great websites out there. There's a government one, which is moneysmart.gov.
Yep.
There's another one that allows us to get a little bit more detailed, which is the calculator site. So I think if we jump on the calculator site, let's run a few scenarios, Kerry, and let's see what the difference of compounding can actually make to an investment.
Let's do it. Because I know when we did this before, I was shocked at the outcome that you could have through compounding.
Absolutely.
So let's get practical today, and we'll put these figures in, and we'd encourage you to do it at home as well. Jump onto one of these sites, put in your own figures and play with the different levers.
Yeah.
And see what's possible. So where will we start, Sanjee?
All right, so let's pick what has the market been doing over the last 10 years? It's performed at an average around 9%. So a market average return, or the return on the index, has roughly been about 9%. Let's benchmark it against that. So if we invested $100,000 with a 9% return and we look at a 10-year time frame, what would we expect, Kerry?
So if I put that into the calculator with it compounding annually, we've got our $100,000 initially invested with nothing else added has gone up to $236,000.
Not bad. So more than double your money in 10 years' time. But what happens if you spend a bit of time and effort and you compound your knowledge as well as your investments and start focusing on the Teaminvest? Well, what we would describe here at Teaminvest is understanding our businesses a bit better and selecting and picking the best businesses to be invested in over that period. So benchmarking it against what our conscious investor software has proven over the last 24 years, which is 18.39%. Let's just round it down to 18% and say that same 100,000 getting 18%. Now it's double what the interest rate we've tried over the last 10 years. That's double the market average rate.
Yep.
Do you think it's just quite double the 236? Works out to roughly about 500, 520?
Well, logic says yes.
No, it's got to be a bit more than that. 520 plus add a little bit. Let's see what that turns out to be. It's about 520, right? So 523 is what would be compounding our at 18% over 10 years. But we know over 10 years it really hasn't had time to take off. That's just the beginning of the compounding effect. We've doubled it because we've doubled our rate of return.
Yep.
But what happens when people like us in our mid-40s or early 40s, we have 20, 25 years for retirement? Instead of 10 years, let's give it some more time, say 25 years. What does that 18% work out to be?
Oh, wow. So we've gone from, what was it, 520 to 6.26 million.
So over 6.2 million.
Wow.
Right? So if I can scrape together $100,000 today, that means when I retire, I'll have about 6.2 million investing myself wisely in stable, safe companies and understanding those companies. I'll be able to sit on around 6.2 million by the time I retire. I'm up for that, right?
Wow. And really, if we dissect this, all we did was leave it for another 15 years.
Absolutely.
Rather than going 10, we went 25.
That's right. But 6.2 million, I've got a nice career. I'll pay down my mortgage. I don't expect to have too much expenses in my retirement. So I'd really like to do something for my daughter. My daughter's 11. I've been teaching her about compounding. If I was able to invest for her and make sure whatever journey in life that she wants to pick up, whatever career path that she wants to choose, whether it be a starving artist or a scientist or a doctor, who knows, right? I would like to let her choose her own adventures in life, but know that there's a security behind that. And what I've been doing is teaching her about compounding. I've been teaching her about finding investments. She often comes, I bring her to the masterclasses during the school holidays. So she comes to learn at 11 years old.
Wow.
Now she has the longest period ahead of her, over 50 years before she hits retirement age. Now, if I set her up with a bit of money, by the time she retires in 50 years, what would that look like? So if we just keep the same investment of $100,000, I don't need the 6.2 at retirement. Let's give that to my daughter. What does that turn into?
Wow.
You seem shocked, Kerry.
So just leaving that for another 25 years has now given me a total investment value of $392.7 million.
392 million.
Wow.
Right? This is what I mean. We don't naturally calculate these things. I couldn't do this in my brain.
No.
And most people wouldn't be able to. But having access to technology and calculators, this is a standard calculator. We're just plugging in figures. I'm investing $100,000 now into my daughter's future. So by the time she retires, she's going to have a few $100 million, right? Quite a nice retirement plan for her.
Absolutely.
Now, that last year, this is after 50 years. What does that 392 turn into if she just let it sit for one more year? So she didn't take it out when she was 61, she took it out at 62.
So
you look shocked, Kerry.
We've gone to 463 million.
So from 392, leaving it for one more year gives her 463, right? That's
Wow.
that's a $70 million year. And every additional year she leaves it in there, that figure grows tremendously, right? But I know that there'll be a lot of people watching and they'll turn around and say, but you haven't accounted for inflation, which is fair enough.
Yep.
Let's factor in over the course of her life, the worst case scenario, let's factor in some inflation. Market is about 3% inflation, but let's err on the side of caution, give it 4% inflation.
4%.
Let's knock that 18 down to 4 or 14.
Okay, so
So she won't be quite as rich because her purchasing power will be impacted. But the type of goods she could purchase when she retires.
okay, so for those listening, we've got our initial investment set at 100,000. We've done a time period of 51 years, and we've got an interest rate of 14%, so that we've taken into account 4% inflation from our initial 18%. Let's have a look. That's still 79, nearly 80 million.
Almost $80 million. It's a huge difference, but we're starting with $100,000.
Yeah.
Right? So squeezing out a couple of extra percent when you can makes a massive difference. So it's scary to think that at the time, the purchasing power of $80 million today is the same as the purchasing power of almost 400 million or over 400 million in 51 years' time.
Yes.
But that's the way it is.
Yeah.
Right? So a cost of a loaf of bread right, will compound. Actually, that's probably a good example. Let's say we're paying how much? Maybe $5 for a loaf of bread. And we know inflation rate is about 4%. We say that. In 51 years, how much is a loaf of bread going to cost it? $37?
$37.
$37 for a $5 loaf of bread. And everything will be around that range. But I know she'll be much better off having that in her back pocket as an investment education that allows her to get those extra percentage points out of the market and being able to sleep at night, taking very educated, smart, rational decisions.
Yeah.
Especially through many times of noise that she'll see across her lifetime.
Absolutely.
As I've started to see across mine, and I'm sure I'll continue to see, and she will also continue to experience. She'll be able to sleep well at night through the whole time and follow her passions, doing whatever it is that interests her, because this fund is there in her, to back her up financially.
Absolutely. And we're not just building wealth for us, we're building wealth for that next generation and the generation after that, which is totally life-changing.
And it's no different to what the Rockefellers did and all of the famous families. They've built up their wealth by compounding over time, over generations. And this is how they're sitting on family wealths of billions and billions of dollars. And they've gone through multiple generations. I'm only talking about a single generational transfer. Now, there's obviously calculations you could do, calculate that out for multiple generations and things like that. But you've got to be able to be in there and do it. And you can see that. Now, if we did the comparison now for the $100,000 and we stayed in an industry super fund where we were getting market average of 9%.
Okay, so let's do $100,000 at 9%.
Over the 51 years, the average person in an industry super fund would be sitting on what? Let's calculate that out. $8 million. So when they're sitting on $8 million, my daughter was sitting on about 80. Oh no, 360.
Yep.
360 million like for like.
So the big levers that we've got to pull is one time.
Yep.
But
Sorry, I made a mistake, didn't I? It wasn't 360, it was 460.
460.
Oh, what's $100 million over 50 years?
100 million between friends. But yeah, we can't go back in time and create more time.
No.
So that's other than getting started sooner rather than later,
Absolutely.
that's the only control we have with
That's right.
time. But if we look at the rate of return, that's something that we do have some control over.
Yes.
And if we think about compounding, at TIP, we talk about compounding wealth, but we also talk about compounding knowledge.
Absolutely.
And it's that education and having that education that enables you to increase your rate of return.
That's right. And when you do them both simultaneously, compound your knowledge and compound your wealth, you really supercharge it, as we've seen with these figures. It sounds ludicrous. It sounds too good to be true. And you do see these ads that super funds play where they say, oh, it's an industry super fund by charging a slightly lower fee. You can compare the two people, one going up the escalator and the other one going down, and they're getting 8% and the other one's getting the same amount but paying less fees.
Yeah.
Maybe 0.5% or 1% improvement. And you see how big that difference is.
Yeah.
Now, forget about that 0.5% fee. Think about if you're able to get a better return overall. And that makes a much, much bigger difference.
Huge amount.
Much bigger difference.
And anyone that's listening to this, I encourage you, jump on to one of these calculators and just play with some of these figures. Because as Sanjee said, as human beings, we just don't think like this. And once you have a look at this, it is mind-blowing what is possible. So we'd encourage you to jump on, and we hope that you walk away inspired.
And do it for yourself, but also do it for your children. Get them to jump on a calculator, work it out to see what are they able to achieve over their lifetime. And Warren Buffett famously says he doesn't go and get haircuts once he starts to understand that each haircut essentially cost him a Ferrari.
Oh.
Right? So that's the thing, right? If you think of it in terms of that, then sometimes you can cut back on frivolous spending. Enjoy yourself by all means. That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
But you can actually cut down on things that you may not need and invest the money to build something up for your future or your children's future and really start generational wealth in your family.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time, Sanjee. This has been inspirational, to say the least.
Thank you, Kerry.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Tip Wealth Builders. We hope you found today's discussion insightful and inspiring. If you'd like to learn more about Tip Group, Teaminvest, or our unique investment approach, visit us at tipgroup.com.au. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast for more episodes. Until next time, stay informed, stay invested, and keep building wealth.